Good evening and welcome. You're watching The Big Story on NDTV Profit and I'm Nupur Talwar Suri. Just to take you through the news that just came in a short while ago. Now, the next RBI Governor has been appointed by the Government of India, and the current Revenue Secretary, Sanjay Malhotra, will be taking over the role from tomorrow. Just to tell you a bit about Sanjay Malhotra, he is a Rajasthan cadre officer and he is currently holding the post of the Revenue Secretary. He will, of course, be appointed for a term of 3 years, and he takes over from Shaktikanta Das. In fact, his term was over, and Shrimi Chaudhary is taking us through the details of the new incoming governor, Sanjay Malhotra.
1990 batch Rajasthan cadre Sanjay Malhotra, who is currently serving as Revenue Secretary, is all set to take charge of RBI Governor from December 12th. He has been one of the top contender, is what the indication we are getting now. However, there were a lot of suspense, in terms of new RBI Governor, and then finally we got the Revenue Secretary to be the next RBI, Governor. So a lot of challenges, of course, in front of he. And this appointment is coming at a time when there is a budget making exercise is halfway through, and in fact being Revenue Secretary, he is one of the important part in the policy decision, in the fiscal measure decision. So it's going to be interesting, because as a RBI Governor also, he has to kind of see how to sort of balance growth and inflation. In the Q2 we have seen 5.4% of growth, so how he is going to tackle that. And there are a lot of discussion around how he is going to take decision in the February monetary policy, where the rate cut is expected. Meantime, we have to also see that who is going to be the Revenue Secretary as well, since the budget making process is on. On the Revenue Secretary, as a Revenue Secretary, if you see, Sanjay Malhotra has taken a lot of decision. He is also ex-officio officer at GST Council. He has done a lot of tweaking in the new personal tax regime. He has brought a lot of changes in the GST also, as one of the important member of the council. So in a nutshell, during his tenure also, he spent almost 33 years in the government so far, and in fact he has taken major decision during as a banking secretary also and as a revenue secretary also. So of course he is one of the veteran bureaucrat who is going to now be RBI governor, and from the both fiscal side and the policy side, he has a great understanding, which is going to help to resolve a lot of issues, particularly the consumption issues which country is facing at this point of time, and some measure we can expect in the upcoming budget.
On to the big story that we are tracking this evening. Is the urban consumption story in India taking a bit of a pause? Well, consumer companies across sectors, from automobiles to those making consumer goods, are sounding the alarm. Retail car sales seem to have taken a hit post the festive season, despite a traditional rise in sales during the wedding period. The Federation of Automobile Dealers Association has reported a 13.7% year-on-year drop in passenger vehicles registration. Commercial vehicle sales also fell by 6.1% during that period. FMCG major Godrej Consumer has in fact come out with a weak Q3 outlook, saying that inflation is impacting its look ahead. Now, the company in its commentary also said that demand conditions in India have been subdued in the past few months. This is similar to what we have heard in the last quarter from Nestle India's CEO, who spoke of a shrinking middle class that's dragging down consumption. Now, that also brings us to the three big questions that we are asking this evening. Number one, of course, is what is the extent of urban India's slowdown? The second question that we are looking at this evening is how can the government push up consumer demand? And is hesitant private enterprise the culprit? And to answer all those questions, we are now joined by C.S. Vigneshwar. He is, of course, the president of FADA, Teresa John, the lead economist of Nirmal Bang, and Neerav Ashar, head equity research analyst at Latin Manharlal. Let me go across first to Mr. Vigneshwar. Mr. Vigneshwar, good evening. Thank you for speaking to us on NDTV Profit. Mr. Vigneshwar, the latest sales numbers not looking too good. What do you see them as being indicative of? Car sales at least have slumped, but there seems to be an uptick in two-wheelers.
Hi, Nupur. Thanks for having FADA over. Yes, you're right. the car sales has been a little bit of a concern in November. We have been down about 13 odd percent. Of course, there are positives coming from the two-wheeler segment. The last year has been good for them, and we are at about 15.8% up year on year. So, which is a good thing. And month on month, again, it's been quite good for the two-wheeler segment. But there are headwinds in the passenger car segment, and we really need to deal with it. And a lot of it is actually coming from the urban side of things. For example, last month, the two-wheeler segment, when you take into consideration, constituted 65% of two-wheeler sales. Likewise, also we have seen a slight increase in urban uptake in passenger vehicles, etc. But we are seeing a lot of headwinds come from the urban India, where inflationary pressures, discretionary spendings, all these things are something which is of a concern to us.
All right, Teresa, John, thank you for joining us. Now, does this weak FMCG commentary that we are seeing coming in point to a larger problem in the urban middle class? Because that's something we've been hearing for a while now.
Yeah, right. So we've been in a situation where food inflation has remained high over the last couple of months, and even maybe the last couple of years, if you were to put it. So that is definitely eating into the discretionary consumption part of urban demand, particularly of the urban lower middle classes. So if you look at it post-COVID, we've not seen significant wage growth, but inflation has gone up significantly. So your real wage growth effectively, both in rural and urban areas, is slightly negative. Rural is now seeing some pickup, but urban demand clearly remains under pressure, particularly for the lower middle class and below.
Coming back to Mr. Vigneshwar. Mr. Vigneshwar, your commentary, of course, has been pretty weak. You've said in the past that you don't really see demand picking up in the second half. Also, you know, a word on the inventory levels. We haven't really seen them dip down that much. They're still at, about 64 to 68 days.
So yes, so we have that inventory which has gone down by about 10 odd days, but not enough. Still, we have more than 2 months of stock. We are hoping that a lot of buying decisions have been preponed to December, which there is a lot of truth to it, because I've seen that in my own showrooms where customers probably wanted to wait for December to pick up vehicles because the offers are usually better in December. So there are never seen before offers in terms of discounts. Also because of the postponement of these sales to December, I think we would be having a decent December, coupled with the fact that OEMs have actually started realizing that the stock levels are high. So they've also taken cognizance of it and started reducing their offtake. Not all of them, but most of them. But the pace is not enough. We probably need to do more in terms of reducing offtake and getting rid of the vehicles which we have right now in our lots.
All right. And now going across to Nirav Ashar. Mr. Ashar, what is the larger picture that we are seeing here? You know, we've seen Nestle India CEO come out last quarter say the same thing, that he's seeing a shrinking in the middle class. We've seen the word coming in from Godrej today, not very, the outlook seems to be pretty poor, not saying it in as many words, but essentially suggesting that high inflation is pinching the pockets of the urban middle class, leading to a slowdown in consumption. What's your sense? What are we seeing? Is this a larger problem now?
Yeah, good evening and thank you for having me on your show. Actually, if one were to look at the FMCG sector right from the time of COVID, we've seen FMCG sector struggling with volumes. Typically, if you were to take into account the growth story of the FMCG sector, approximately 2/3 of the growth is supposed to come from the volume side, and 1/3 of the growth is supposed to come from the realization side. Now, the first engine, which is the volume growth, has been a very big disappointment. If one were to take into account the FMCG sector's growth in terms of volumes, it has been very, very disappointing, and I think most of the growth has come from the realization side. So I think FMCG companies have been forced to increase prices on account of the commodity inflation. The commodity inflation remains a very, very tricky part, and most of the FMCG companies have managed to pass on the price hikes to the final consumers. That is how they've been able to hold on to their margins. Apart from this, apart from the price increases, there have been certain other measures like reduced grammages and revision in the trade schemes, etc., and some amount of revamp in the distribution setup, etc. So these are all cost-saving measures. Apart from that, I think we've also seen certain segments do very well. For example, e-commerce has been doing quite well. Export markets have been doing quite well. Certain categories like foods and refreshments have been doing quite well. So this is one side of the story, that this is how they've been able to hold on to their margins. But I think the volume growth remains a cause of concern. That is one. And today, I think what Godrej has said is very pertinent. But I think the increase in the palm oil prices, of course, 20-30% hike in the prices seems to be a short-term and a speculative phenomenon. And they're very confident that this is something which will not impact the demand. But I think all said and done, the fact remains that urban demand has been very badly impacted, and rural demand is making a comeback, albeit in a very it's coming back in a very small way. So I think definitely there are headwinds and challenges ahead for the FMCG sector.
Right, Neerav, just to that point that you were making, palm oil prices, of course, are causing a bit of a havoc, and we've heard that commentary coming in from Godrej as well. When do you see this segment easing, perhaps, are you seeing it play out in the shorter term?
Well, I think it's difficult to hold on to such high level of prices, and eventually I think it's going to be a short-term phenomenon, and we expect the prices to settle down as soon as the speculative activity is over. So I think we can expect some normalization over there. But I think the broader problem still remains that the urban demand has been very badly impacted. And we've seen statement from companies like Britannia. They have also indicated that the rising cost of rentals, the cost of living in the urban centers, the healthcare, the education costs, they have increased so much that discretionary spending definitely has taken a beating during the recent past.
Right, Teresa, coming back to you now. Teresa, are you perhaps seeing the post-pandemic euphoria now fizzling out? At play, of course, are also high interest rates. There is muted wage growth that we are seeing, and also, poor job prospects. How much of all of that do you see hurting urban demand?
Yeah, so to some extent, this is not just an India-specific phenomenon, but even globally as well. We are seeing the pandemic era pent-up demand actually coming off. That said, we continue to see a K-shaped recovery in India. So globally, what is happening is that the excess savings of the pandemic are now largely exhausted. So across the board, we are seeing some moderation in demand compared to what we've seen over the last 2 years. So that's a global phenomenon. But within urban demand, the premium segments continue to do relatively well. So we think the K-shaped recovery is sort of here to stay. Even the upper middle classes, so to say, like over the last 2 years, we've seen some impact on sectors like IT because of the global slowdown. If you look at the Naukri JobSpeak Index, it's largely been negative over the last 12 to 18 months. And even now we're seeing like just marginal growth in low single digits. So I think that is also kind of weighing on demand, the uncertainty that we have seen even in terms of your white-collar job growth over the last, say, 18 months or so.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I wanted a word from you also on the rural segment. Now, what we are seeing is a bit of a pickup as far as, the numbers that are coming in from FADA. But what's your sense, Teresa, on the rural sector? We've seen a good monsoon, so perhaps, demand could pick up there?
Yeah, so rural on a low base is picking up. That's what you see in the tractor sales number that we've got from FADA, even the two-wheeler number. That both are reasonably good. But even the rural recovery is not very even at this point in time. So there are some states which continue to be impacted, because the rainfall distribution was not very even. Some states had floods. So we recently visited Bihar, and we saw that even there, that while overall the monsoons have been good, in some places there's been flooding. In some places the rice harvest was delayed. So there have been issues. Similarly, even in Punjab, the rice harvesting has been delayed because of delayed offtake from FCI. So there are state-specific issues. So I don't think the rural recovery is even across all states.
All right. Mr. Vigneshwar, coming back to you, Teresa was mentioning the premium segment, and that's been the story that we've seen play out in the automobile segment as well. Premium cars continue to do well, but we continue to see slippages, in other demands. So is that the story that's continuing this month as well?
So the premiumization of the market has been happening for quite some time, whether it's whether it's going to be even the trucks or even the cars. But one thing we need to consider is the average cost of a car in 2019, at the end of 2019, was around 6.5 lakhs. And right now the cost is about 10.5 lakhs. So we need to realize that there's been a huge inflation for whatever reason in terms of technology, because of new emission norms, safety norms. All these things are actually taking up the cost of the car. But the salaries have not gone up 70%, which they can't. So it's a competitive market out there. So we need to realize that these are inflationary pressures which are actually existing in the market, and the government probably can really help us out as an industry by rationalizing some kind of GST towards the entry-level models at least, whether it's two-wheeler or whether it is the cars. This would really help bring in some kind of breath back into the industry, because otherwise it's going to be a struggle in the urban segment as well as the rural segment in the future.
All right, now we've been talking a bit about the K-shaped recovery that we are seeing in the long tail of the COVID. Is that something that your numbers also perhaps reflect, Mr. Vigneshwar?
We really don't know, but we are right now talking about at least a 5 to 6% growth towards financial year for passenger vehicles, and about 12-13% would be for the two-wheelers. So that's what we're thinking of. Beyond that, I think there are too many market factors which are in play right now in terms of discount stocks, new vehicles being introduced. So we need to probably wait and watch.
All right, now coming to Nirav right now, what is it that the government can do? There's been talk of how the government can essentially step in and at least provide an environment for people to spend more. So what is your sense on why is the government not spending yet? Are we going to see some sort of a change in perhaps the medium term?
Yeah, so actually the government has been doing its bit. I think the infrastructure spending in the economy, which is likely to have a multiplier effect on the economy. But we've seen some slowdown in the last 2 quarters. In Q1, of course, it was on account of the elections and the heat wave, etc., all these problems. And in Q2, we have seen a monsoon. I think the spending activity is likely to pick up. Government tendering activity is picking up since August, and I think orders are being awarded. I think that should have a multiplier effect, although it will come with a lag effect. And apart from this, of course, rationalization of taxes and lower levies would definitely aid demand in the medium to long term.
Teresa, what's your view on that? Are we going to see the government open its purse strings very quickly? One was expecting that the government will begin perhaps spending after the Maharashtra and the Jharkhand elections, not coming in yet. What's your sense?
So we've seen a slowdown in government spending. So while there have been elections, monsoons, etc., I think it's also partially attributable to the fact that if you see government, the capex pipeline over the last 1 year, that has been relatively muted. So even last year, there were not too many award of road projects, etc. So roads and rails have been the kind of key driver of capex on the ground. So even the budgeted numbers are actually talking only about, while the overall budgeted capex growth is 17%, I'm talking about the central government. The actual, in terms of sectors like roads and rails, is only around 5%. So I think the slowdown in the capex pipeline over the last year or so is also kind of impacting growth. It will take some time for the pipeline itself to build. The government has now started awarding projects, but as even Neera was saying, it will take some time for that to translate into actual investments. So there is a likelihood that the government might slip up on their capex target for this year, is my sense. And we've also seen states, move towards higher revenue spending. So a lot of populist schemes have been announced. So as a result, we've seen a slowdown in the capex spending. So year to date, of all the key states, if you see, the capex spending is down by around 6% year on year. Central government is still down by around 14-15% year on year. You could see a pickup from these levels, definitely. But there could still be a shortfall when compared to the budgeted numbers.
Right, a quick, word on the kind, you were talking about the infrastructure projects, but there are, road projects which are worth about 40,000 crore rupees, which are still seeming to be stuck, as the NHI is unable really to score land proposals. So what's your sense on that? That, of course, is also part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So you're actually seeing problems on land awards, etc. So that is adding to the problem of the muted pipeline. So even the awarded projects are not really taking off. But probably on the land acquisition side, these are issues that can be resolved, but it probably will take time.
All right, Mr. Vigneshwar, coming back to you, you were earlier talking about the fact that there is lack of financing, and that perhaps is one of the reasons that we are seeing for the poor sales of commercial vehicles, at least. Now, do you see this as a result of the RBI essentially tightening its unsecured loans?
I've been speaking to some banking sources. Perhaps that is one of the reasons, but generally when the whole economic activity is low, banks also are a bit circumspect in terms of investing in customers. So the moment we have large infrastructure projects open up, larger deals of vehicles would be picked up. And that's when the bankers are getting very aggressive with their rates.
Right. All right. And Neerav, coming to you, we, of course, are going to see Donald Trump take over next month. And if he does follow through on what he's spoken about in terms of tariff threats, we could see the US also going into an inflationary situation, which could have its own impact on India as well. So with food price inflation still quite high, how do you see the situation unfolding over here?
Yeah, so food price inflation is a global phenomenon, and I think changing climate patterns, global warming, etc., have only accentuated the problems. And I think the most important part for any economy is to manage the inflation. When we spoke recently about the projects being executed and being awarded, I think what happens is that you typically have a situation where projects are awarded, and when the execution part starts, that is where the tricky part begins. Because you tend to have commodity, you have to deal with commodity inflation, you have to deal with the availability of skilled labor, cost overruns, and all these problems which come typically during the execution period. So I think managing inflation, whether it is food inflation or whether it is commodity inflation, is going to be the biggest challenge as far as the government is concerned, at the micro level as well as at the macro level.
And Teresa, final word on that from you as well. We see Donald Trump take over, next month. There are, of course, tariff threats that are hanging over everybody's head. But how do you see that panning out back home?
I don't see too much of an inflationary impact on India from the tariffs per se. For one, if you see, tariffs have not always been inflationary because if you, I mean, if assuming tariffs are imposed on China, India will also be affected, but probably to a lesser extent. China is still sitting on a lot of excess capacity. So China will continue to export deflation to the world. At least that is my sense. Secondly, on commodity prices, at least on the crude oil side, we may not see that much of inflation coming through because Donald Trump clearly wants lower oil prices, and since he's not so much focused on climate change compared to the earlier administration, you could actually see crude oil output in the US going up. So at least on the energy side, you may not see too much inflation. Thirdly, if you look at, I mean, in general, Republican governments, they're more prone towards peace. So I think there could be some resolution, or at least some slowdown in the geopolitical tension that we've been seeing. So if you take all of this together, probably inflation may not go up to the extent that people are fearing. Food prices, there is some volatility that cannot be ruled out. So for India, that will remain a concern. But apart from food, I don't see too much of an inflationary impact purely coming in from the higher tariffs.
All right. So the word coming in, of course, is that we have to wait and watch how this unfolds. All three of you, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Vigneshwar, as well as Teresa and Nirav, thank you. All right, with that, it is a wrap on the big story. Thank you very much for joining us on NDTV Profit. But stay with us as we bring you more.